The conference room fell silent. Ethan Castellan, our CEO's son and newly appointed Director of Business Development, leaned back in his leather chair with that particular smile, the one that said he'd already made up his mind. "This isn't really your area, is it?" His words hung in the air like smoke after a fire. The three executives from Thornfield Industries shifted uncomfortably. I stood at the head of the table, my presentation frozen on slide 17 of 23, my hands still poised over the remote. Every instinct screamed to defend myself, to list my credentials, to remind everyone in that room that I'd closed deals worth millions. But something held me back. Maybe it was the way his father sat in the corner, watching this little power play unfold. Maybe it was the exhaustion of fighting battles I shouldn't have to fight, so I did something that clearly surprised everyone. I said nothing. I simply smiled, nodded politely, and sat down. What Ethan didn't know, what none of them knew, was that silence would cost him everything he thought he'd already won. Welcome to the Payback Office channel, where we share stories of workplace justice, karmic returns, and those beautiful moments when underestimation meets reality. If these stories resonate with you, I'm glad you're here with us on this journey. If you haven't subscribed yet, I'd appreciate you joining our community. We're working toward reaching 8,000 subscribers, and your support helps us continue sharing these stories. The subscribe button is right there whenever you're ready. Now let me properly introduce myself. My name is Hannah Westbrook, and at the time of this story, I was a senior account executive at Castellan Solutions, a mid-sized consulting firm in Portland. I grew up watching my parents run a small family hardware store in Eugene, nothing fancy, but it taught me something crucial. It taught me that everyone's contribution matters, from the person stocking shelves to the one balancing the books. That upbringing gave me something no business school could teach: genuine empathy and the ability to see people, really see them, regardless of their title or position. Those roots kept me grounded even as I climbed the corporate ladder. Let me take you back to how this all began, 3 months before that disastrous pitch meeting. I'd been with Castellan Solutions for 4 years. The company specialized in supply chain optimization for manufacturing companies, helping them cut costs, improve efficiency, and maximize their logistics operations. It wasn't glamorous work, but it was complex, detail-oriented, and incredibly impactful for our clients. A 5% improvement in supply chain efficiency could translate to millions in savings for a large manufacturer. I'd worked my way up from junior account coordinator to senior account executive through a combination of long hours, detailed proposal writing, and what my former manager called an unusual ability to translate technical jargon into human language. Our clients weren't just buying software or consulting services. They were buying trust, clarity, and results. I made sure they got all three. The company culture had been solid under CEO Harrison Castellan's leadership. He was old school in some ways, handwritten thank you notes, remembering employees' kids' names, the whole 9 yards. But he'd built the firm from the ground up and understood that talent mattered more than pedigree. Then came the succession planning. Harrison was 68 and wanted to start stepping back. The board suggested bringing in external candidates for the Director of Business Development position, a role that would essentially groom the next generation of leadership. Several of us internally had our eyes on it. I'd been preparing for months, taking on larger accounts, mentoring junior staff, even completing an executive leadership program on weekends. Then Harrison made the announcement in our quarterly town hall. "I'm thrilled to introduce our new Director of Business Development, someone who comes to us with an MBA from Wharton and experience at 2 major consulting firms. Please welcome my son, Ethan Castellan." The applause was polite but strained. Nobody had seen this coming. Ethan was 32, impeccably dressed, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who'd never been told no. His resume looked impressive on paper: undergraduate degree from Princeton, MBA from Wharton, 2 years at McKinsey, 18 months at Deloitte. What his resume didn't show was that he'd left both firms under vague circumstances, or that his father had made substantial donations to both universities right before admission decisions. In his first week, Ethan called individual meetings with all the senior staff. When my turn came, I walked into his new corner office, freshly renovated, naturally, with an open mind. Maybe the nepotism concerns were unfair. Maybe he'd genuinely earned his credentials. Hannah, right? He didn't stand up or offer his hand, just gestured to the chair across from his desk. My personnel file was open on his screen. That's right, Hannah Westbrook. So, 4 years here, started as a coordinator, worked your way up. He said it like he was reading a grocery list. Education, state school, no graduate degree, interesting. I've been considering an executive MBA program, I offered, but the workload here has been substantial, in a good way. Right, I see you've managed some mid-tier accounts. Good experience. He clicked through screens without really looking at me. I'm going to be restructuring how we approach business development, bringing in some frameworks from my time at McKinsey. More data-driven, more strategic. Less relationship-based, more results-oriented. I bit back my first response. Relationships were results in our industry. Instead, I asked, what kind of changes are you envisioning? Well, for one thing, I'll be taking point on all major pitches. Clients expect to see leadership in the room, especially for high-value contracts. The senior executives can support, provide data, that sort of thing, but the strategic vision needs to come from the director level. Translation: I'd be demoted to a supporting role on accounts I'd spent years developing. I understand, I said carefully. Though I should mention that several of our key clients have long-standing relationships with their account executives. Thornfield Industries, for example, I've worked with their VP of operations for 3 years. There's significant trust built there. Ethan smiled, and I saw a flash of what would become painfully familiar. Hannah, no offense, but trust is great for maintaining accounts. Growth requires vision, strategic vision. That's what I'm here to provide. The meeting lasted 5 more minutes. I left with a sick feeling in my stomach and an updated org chart showing my accounts being strategically realigned under Ethan's direct oversight. Over the next 6 weeks, I watched Ethan systematically insert himself into deals that were already 90% closed. He'd show up to final presentations, deliver a polished speech about synergistic optimization frameworks and paradigm-shifting logistics solutions, then take credit when the contracts were signed. Contracts I'd spent months negotiating. To his credit, Harrison seemed uncomfortable with his son's approach. I'd catch him watching Ethan with a furrowed brow during meetings or asking me pointed questions about account status that suggested he knew exactly what was happening. But he never intervened. Family complicated things. The real trouble started when Ethan set his sights on Thornfield Industries. Thornfield was a manufacturer of industrial components, nothing sexy, but they supplied parts to automotive, aerospace, and construction equipment companies across the western United States. Their annual revenue was somewhere north of $300 million, and they'd been struggling with supply chain inefficiencies that were costing them roughly $15 million a year in delayed shipments, excess inventory, and expedited freight charges. I'd been cultivating a relationship with their VP of operations, Walter Montgomery, for almost 3 years. We'd met at an industry conference where I'd given a presentation on just-in-time inventory optimization. Walter had approached me afterward with specific questions about their challenges. Over the following years, I'd provided him with white papers, introduced him to relevant contacts, and generally positioned Castellan Solutions as the experts who could solve their problems when they were ready. That moment came in early September. Walter called me directly. Hannah, I think it's time. Our CEO is finally acknowledging we need outside expertise. The board's approved a budget for a comprehensive supply chain overhaul. We're talking a multi-year engagement, probably 7 to 10 million total value. My heart raced. This would be the largest deal I'd ever brought in. Walter, that's fantastic. When would you like to start the conversation? We're requesting proposals from 3 firms. I'll be honest, you're my preference, but I need you to knock the proposal out of the park. Our procurement team has final say, and they're bringing in our CFO and CEO for the finalist presentation. Can you put something together in 3 weeks? Absolutely. I'll need to understand your pain points in detail, get access to some of your current logistics data, and I'll set up preliminary meetings. Hannah, I'm trusting you here. Don't make me look bad. You won't regret this, Walter. I spent the next 2 weeks working late every night. I conducted interviews with Thornfield's logistics coordinators, analyzed their shipping data, mapped their current supplier network, and identified 17 specific areas where we could drive immediate improvement. I built financial models showing projected savings. I created implementation timelines. I even developed training frameworks for their staff. The proposal document was 73 pages of detailed analysis and solutions. It was the best work I'd ever done. Then I made my mistake. I followed protocol. Company policy required that any proposal over $5 million be reviewed by the Director of Business Development before submission. So I sent the draft to Ethan, along with a summary memo and a request for a brief review meeting. He called me into his office the next morning. My proposal sat on his desk, still in its binder. This is impressive work, Hannah, really impressive. He flipped through pages, nodding appreciatively. The level of detail here, the analysis, you clearly put in significant effort. Thank you, I think we have a strong shot at winning this. Absolutely, which is why I'll be taking the lead on the pitch. My stomach dropped. I'm sorry. This is exactly the kind of high-value, strategic engagement I was brought in to close. You've done excellent groundwork. Seriously, this research is top-notch. But when we walk into that boardroom with Thornfield's C-suite, they need to see Castellan leadership. They need to see the Director of Business Development, who'll be their strategic partner. Ethan, with respect, I've been building this relationship for 3 years. Walter specifically asked for me. And you'll be there? Absolutely. You'll present the technical details, the implementation framework, all of that. But I'll handle the strategic vision portion, and I'll field questions from the CEO and CFO. These are executive-level conversations, Hannah. It's not a reflection on your abilities, it's about appropriate organizational alignment. Every professional instinct told me to push back harder, but I also knew the reality. Ethan had position power, family connection, and an ego that didn't handle challenges well. If I fought this and lost, which I would, I might get pushed off the account entirely. I understand, I heard myself say. When would you like to review the presentation deck? I'll take the lead on building that. Use your research, obviously, but frame it within a stronger strategic narrative. I'm thinking we open with a McKinsey-style situation complication resolution framework, really grab their attention with the business case before diving into technical details. I nodded, feeling something calcify in my chest. Whatever you think is best. Over the next week, Ethan restructured my entire presentation. The detailed analysis got compressed into appendix slides. My carefully crafted implementation timeline became high-level strategic phases. He added slides full of consulting buzzwords, transformational logistics ecosystems, adaptive supply chain paradigms, dynamic optimization matrices. It was like watching someone turn a precise surgical tool into a decorative showpiece. But I played along. I attended the revision meetings, provided data when requested, and kept my opinions to myself. If this was how the game was played, I'd play it. The pitch was scheduled for a Thursday afternoon. Thornfield's CEO, CFO, and procurement team would attend, along with Walter and 2 of his senior logistics managers. It was scheduled for 90 minutes in their main conference room. Ethan and I drove to Thornfield's headquarters together. During the 40-minute drive, he practiced his opening remarks, talking more to himself than to me. The key is establishing credibility immediately. They need to see thought leadership, not just vendor capability. I'll position us as strategic partners in their transformation journey, not just consultants implementing solutions. I watched the landscape pass and wondered if Walter knew what he was about to get. We arrived 15 minutes early. Walter met us in the lobby, and I saw his smile falter slightly when Ethan dominated the greeting, pumping Walter's hand enthusiastically and launching into small talk about the industry. Walter's eyes found mine over Ethan's shoulder, questioning. I gave him a small smile that I hoped conveyed confidence. The conference room was set up boardroom style. Thornfield's CEO, James Hartley, sat at the head of the table, late 50s, sharp eyes, wearing a shirt with sleeves actually rolled up. Their CFO, Monica Vance, sat to his right, already reviewing what looked like our proposal summary. The three-person procurement team, led by a woman named Ashley Brennan, occupied the opposite side. Ethan immediately moved to shake hands with James, introducing himself as Director of Business Development, leading Castellan's strategic consulting practice. I followed, offering polite greetings, hyper-aware that I'd been repositioned as supporting cast. "Well, let's get started," James said once we'd settled. "We've got a lot to cover, and I'm sure you've prepared thoroughly. Walter speaks highly of your firm." Ethan smiled and launched into his opening. "Thank you for that, James, and thank you all for your time today. What I want to do is take a step back from the tactical details for a moment and talk about what we're really discussing here, which isn't just supply chain optimization, but fundamental business transformation." For the next 20 minutes, Ethan held court. He spoke eloquently about transformation frameworks, about his experience with Fortune 500 companies, about paradigm shifts and ecosystem thinking. His slides were beautiful, elegant graphics, minimal text, very consultant chic. They were also increasingly detached from Thornfield's actual problems. I watched the procurement team's body language shift, arms crossing, glances exchanged. Ashley started making notes, her pen movements growing more aggressive. Monica, the CFO, interrupted twice to ask specific questions about cost savings, and both times Ethan pivoted back to strategic concepts without providing numbers. Walter looked increasingly uncomfortable. James Hartley's expression was harder to read. He sat back, fingers steepled, watching Ethan with the same attention you might give to an interesting but ultimately irrelevant sales pitch. 40 minutes in, Ethan finally transitioned. But rather than continue at the strategic level, let me hand this over to Hannah Westbrook, one of our senior account executives, who can walk you through some of the tactical implementation details. Tactical implementation details. He just framed all my work, 3 years of relationship building, weeks of detailed analysis, as tactical details beneath the strategic conversation he'd been having. I stood and moved to the front, connecting my laptop to replace his presentation. As my first slide loaded, a detailed breakdown of Thornfield's current supply chain pain points, I caught Walter's eye. He looked almost apologetic. Something shifted inside me. I'd spent this entire pitch sitting quietly, playing the supporting role, letting Ethan diminish my work. For what? Professional courtesy, fear of rocking the boat, some misguided hope that staying small would somehow serve me. My opening slide showed the 17 specific inefficiency points I'd identified in Thornfield's operations. Real problems, quantified costs, actual solutions. "Thank you, Ethan," I said calmly. "Though I'd like to respectfully reframe something. What I'm about to present isn't tactical details. It's the actual substance of how we'll save Thornfield between $12 and $16 million over the next 3 years." I felt Ethan tense beside me. Across the table, James Hartley leaned forward slightly. I walked them through everything. The shipping route inefficiencies costing them $2.3 million annually. The inventory management gaps creating $1.8 million in excess carrying costs. The supplier relationship fragmentation adding another $1 million plus in lost volume discounts. For each problem, I showed our specific solution, implementation timeline, and projected savings. I used their data, their language, their actual business context. The room's energy completely changed. Ashley's pen flew across her notepad with actual interest now. Monica started asking detailed financial questions I'd prepared for and could answer with specific numbers and models. Walter's shoulders relaxed. When I presented the implementation timeline, James stopped me. "This shows your team embedded on site for the first 6 months. Walk me through what that actually looks like day to day." I did. I explained the training approach, the change management framework, the phased rollout that would minimize disruption to their current operations. I talked about the weekly progress reviews, the key performance indicators we'd track, and the adjustment protocols when reality didn't match projections. Because, I added, despite what any consulting framework suggests, implementation is never clean. There will be unexpected challenges. What matters is having people on the ground who understand your specific context and can adapt in real time. James actually smiled at that. Finally, someone who admits that consulting isn't just about beautiful slide decks. I returned the smile. Beautiful slide decks don't reduce freight costs. Better routing algorithms and renegotiated carrier contracts do. We were 75 minutes into the 90-minute meeting. I'd covered everything substantive. The procurement team looked satisfied. Monica was nodding as she reviewed her notes. Walter looked relieved. Then Ethan, who'd been sitting with increasingly rigid posture, decided to reassert himself. I think what Hannah's done an excellent job demonstrating, he interjected, standing up to reclaim the front of the room, is the execution layer of the strategic framework I outlined earlier. The key is understanding how these tactical implementations ladder up to the broader transformation paradigm. Ashley, the procurement lead, cut him off mid-sentence. I think we're good on paradigms. Hannah, quick question about the supplier consolidation approach on slide 34. Ethan stood there awkwardly for a beat, then sat back down. His jaw was tight. I answered Ashley's question, then fielded 3 more detailed inquiries from Monica about financial projections and risk mitigation. James asked about our team composition and my background specifically. I see you've worked with Walter for several years, he noted. That kind of relationship foundation matters. We're not just buying a proposal, we're buying people we'll work with closely for multiple years. Exactly right, I agreed. Which is why if Castellan Solutions has the privilege of earning this engagement, I want to be clear about something. I won't just be managing this project, I'll be in the trenches with your team. You'll have my direct line. When something goes wrong at 2 a.m. because a shipment's stuck at customs, I'll be the one you call, and I'll be the one who answers. Walter was grinning now. The meeting wrapped up shortly after. Handshakes all around, promises to follow up within 2 weeks once they'd completed their evaluation process. As we packed up, James approached me directly. Really impressive presentation, Hannah. You clearly understand our business. Thank you. I've enjoyed getting to know your operation. Ethan inserted himself into the conversation. We're excited about the potential partnership, James. I think what we've demonstrated today is the kind of strategic and tactical excellence that... This isn't really your area, is it? The words came out casually, almost friendly, but they stopped Ethan mid-sentence. James was looking at him with polite curiosity. I'm sorry, Ethan's smile remained fixed. Supply chain logistics, industrial manufacturing, the detail-level work. James gestured vaguely at the presentation still displayed. Your background is more high-level strategy consulting, right? McKinsey, was it? Well, yes, but strategic frameworks apply across industries. Sure. Just seems like Hannah here has really gotten into the weeds of our specific situation. That kind of specialized knowledge, that's valuable. He turned back to me, effectively dismissing Ethan. Walter will be in touch soon. The drive back to the office was excruciating. Ethan said nothing for the first 20 minutes, staring out the window with a clenched jaw. Then, finally, that was inappropriate. I'm sorry. Undermining me in front of the client. I opened the meeting, established the strategic framework, positioned our firm as thought leaders. Then you completely ignored that positioning and went straight into technical minutiae. I kept my eyes on the road. They asked technical questions, I answered them. You contradicted my framing. You made it seem like the strategic vision didn't matter. I didn't contradict anything. I provided the specific details they needed to make a decision. Details that I was going to cover in the appropriate context. You jumped ahead, made me look uninformed. Ethan, I cut him off, surprising myself. With respect, you didn't look uninformed because of anything I did. You looked uninformed because you spent 40 minutes talking about transformation paradigms without mentioning a single specific thing about Thornfield's actual supply chain. His face flushed red. Excuse me. They didn't need a framework. They needed solutions to specific problems costing them specific amounts of money. That's what I provided. That's what will win us this contract. That's not your call to make. I'm the director of business development. I determine pitch strategy. You're a senior account executive, which means you support my approach, not freelance your own. The rest of the drive passed in hostile silence. When we got back to the office, Ethan went straight to his father's office and closed the door. I went to my desk, pulled up my notes from the meeting, and started drafting a follow-up email to Walter with additional data he'd requested. 20 minutes later, Harrison's assistant asked me to come to his office. Both Castellans were there, Harrison behind his desk looking tired, Ethan standing by the window, arms crossed. "Hannah, sit down, please." Harrison's tone was measured but serious. "I've been hearing about the Thornfield pitch. Sounds like there was some tension." I sat. The pitch went well overall. The client was engaged, asked good questions, and seemed satisfied with our proposal. "That's not what I'm hearing," Ethan interjected. "What I'm hearing is that you disregarded the agreed-upon presentation strategy, contradicted my positioning in front of the client, and made independent commitments about project involvement without consulting me." Harrison looked at me. "Your take?" I chose my words carefully. Ethan and I had different perspectives on how to approach the pitch. He focused on high-level strategic frameworks. I focused on specific solutions to Thornfield's quantified problems. The client responded more to the latter approach. As for commitments, I simply clarified my intended involvement if we win the engagement, which is consistent with how I've managed every major account I've worked. "You see," Ethan turned to his father. No acknowledgement that she was out of line, no recognition of the chain of command. Harrison held up his hand. "Let me ask this directly, Hannah. Do you believe the pitch was successful?" "Yes, based on client engagement and feedback, I believe we have a strong chance of winning this contract." "And do you believe that success was because of or despite the approach differences?" I met his eyes. I believe Thornfield's decision-makers are experienced executives who can distinguish between consulting platitudes and actual expertise. I believe they responded to substance. I believe that's what will win us this deal. The implication hung in the air. Ethan's face darkened. Harrison sighed. "Ethan, give me a moment with Hannah." "Dad, please." Ethan left, closing the door harder than necessary. Harrison leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 68 years. "You're putting me in a difficult position." "That's not my intention." I also know my son." He smiled ruefully. "I know what he's good at and what he's still learning. Hannah, you've been with this company for 4 years. You've consistently delivered results. You've earned respect from clients and colleagues. I value that. I appreciate that. But Ethan is my succession plan. He's learning the business, yes, and he'll make mistakes, yes. Part of my job is giving him room to learn while minimizing damage. Part of your job, if you want to continue advancing here, is helping him succeed." The message was clear: get in line or get out. "I understand," I said quietly. "Good. Now, regardless of how we got there, it sounds like the Thornfield pitch was strong. Let's see what happens." I returned to my desk feeling hollowed out. I'd done everything right, built the relationship, crafted the solution, delivered the pitch, and somehow I was the problem. 2 weeks passed. Ethan maintained chilly professionalism, communicating with me only when necessary and always via email, never in person. Harrison remained cordial but distant. The rest of the team had clearly picked up on the tension, but nobody asked about it directly. I threw myself into my other accounts, trying not to obsess over Thornfield's decision. Walter had sent a brief thank you email after the pitch, but nothing since. That could mean anything. Then came the Friday morning that changed everything. I was reviewing a proposal for a smaller client when my desk phone rang. Internal extension. Ethan's number. "Hannah, come to my office, please." He hung up without waiting for a response. When I arrived, he was behind his desk, expression unreadable. "Close the door." I did. "Thornfield's procurement team called this morning. They've completed their evaluation." My heart hammered, and they're moving forward with us. Pending final contract negotiations, we won the engagement. $8.2 million over 3 years. Relief and triumph flooded through me. That's fantastic. Walter must be. There's a condition. Ethan's voice was flat. Actually, it's more than a condition. It's a non-negotiable requirement. Something in his tone made my stomach clench. What kind of requirement? He turned his monitor toward me. An email from Ashley Brennan, Thornfield's procurement lead, was displayed. He'd highlighted one paragraph in yellow. After careful evaluation of all 3 proposals, Thornfield Industries has selected Castellan Solutions pending agreement to the following terms. First, the project must be led by Hannah Westbrook as primary point of contact and on-site project director, with guaranteed involvement throughout the full engagement period. Our evaluation committee was unanimous that Ms. Westbrook demonstrated the specific expertise and client relationship necessary for success. Second, we require quarterly executive reviews, but these should be conducted by Castellan's CEO Harrison Castellan, not the Director of Business Development, to ensure appropriate senior oversight without interfering with project execution. I read it twice, then a third time. They'd cut Ethan out, completely. Not just reduced his role, eliminated it. They wanted me to lead, and they wanted Harrison for oversight, but they specifically didn't want Ethan involved in execution. The silence stretched out. Congratulations, Ethan finally said. His voice could have frozen water. You got what you wanted. Ethan, I didn't. Save it. You played me from the start. Acted cooperative, submitted to my direction, then completely undermined me in the pitch. You positioned yourself as the expert and made me look like dead weight. Now you've got an $8 million engagement with your name on it. That's not what happened. I presented our solution honestly. If they responded to my approach. If they responded to you sabotaging my authority, you mean? I didn't sabotage anything. You sabotaged yourself by showing up unprepared, delivering generic consulting frameworks instead of specific solutions, and treating me like administrative support after I'd spent 3 years building that relationship. The words came out harder than I'd intended. We stared at each other across his desk. You need to be very careful, Ethan said quietly, about how you proceed here. Is that a threat? It's reality. Yes, you won this round. Yes, the client asked for you specifically, but I'm still the Director of Business Development. I still control account assignments, performance reviews, and advancement opportunities. You think you can just go around me now because you've got one big win. I think I can do my job, which is delivering results for clients, while disrespecting organizational hierarchy, while prioritizing client needs over internal politics. His jaw clenched. Get out. I left, hands shaking with adrenaline. Back at my desk, I pulled up the full email from Ashley. There was more below what Ethan had shown me. Please note that our decision was significantly influenced by Miss Westbrook's presentation and demonstrated knowledge of our specific operational challenges. While we appreciated the broader strategic context provided by Mr. Castellan, our evaluation committee determined that execution expertise and relationship foundation were more critical factors for this engagement than high-level consulting frameworks. We look forward to working with Ms. Westbrook and the Castellan Solutions team. It was professional language, but the message was clear. They'd seen exactly what happened in that conference room. They knew Ethan was window dressing. They wanted the person who actually knew what she was talking about. Within an hour, Harrison called me to his office. This time, Ethan wasn't there. I assume you've heard about Thornfield's decision, Harrison said. Yes, Ethan shared the news. And their conditions. Yes. He studied me for a long moment. Hannah, I'm going to ask you something directly, and I want an honest answer. Did you intentionally position yourself to cut my son out of this engagement? I met his eyes. No, I positioned myself as the person most qualified to deliver results for the client. If that happened to highlight gaps in Ethan's preparation or expertise, that was a consequence of doing my job well, not a political maneuver. Ethan sees it as a power play. Ethan sees everything as a power play because that's how he thinks. I see it as a client making an informed decision about who they trust to solve their $8 million problem. Harrison actually smiled slightly at that. You've gotten more direct since I last really talked to you. I've gotten tired of being diminished for doing good work. He nodded slowly. Fair enough. Here's the situation. Thornfield wants you. They're paying us $8.2 million for your expertise. From a business perspective, I'd be a fool to do anything except give them exactly what they're asking for. From a family perspective, this is complicated. I understand. Do you? Because Ethan is angry. He feels humiliated. And while I can overrule him on this, and I will, because we're not walking away from $8 million, I can't protect you from the fallout indefinitely. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to let me do my job. Which is what I'm going to do. You'll lead the Thornfield engagement. Full authority, full credit. I'll handle the quarterly executive reviews personally. Ethan will not be involved in day-to-day execution. Relief washed over me. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You're going to be under a microscope. Every decision, every milestone, every client interaction. Ethan will be watching for you to fail. So you can't. You understand? You need this engagement to be flawless. It will be. I hope so, for both our sakes. The Thornfield implementation kicked off 3 weeks later. I assembled a team of 5 specialists, logistics analysts, data engineers, and change management consultants. We embedded on-site at Thornfield's headquarters, working directly with Walter's operations team. The first 6 months were brutal. 12-hour days were standard. Weekend work was common. We encountered every implementation challenge I'd anticipated and several I hadn't. Supplier resistance to new contracts. IT integration headaches with their legacy systems. Pushback from warehouse managers who've been doing things the same way for 20 years. But we worked through it. Every problem got a solution. Every setback got a recovery plan. Every small win got celebrated with the Thornfield team. I kept Harrison updated with detailed weekly reports. He forwarded them to Ethan without comment, a subtle reminder that success was the best response to skepticism. By month 8, we'd implemented the new routing algorithms and renegotiated carrier contracts. Freight costs dropped by 18%. Monica, the CFO, sent Harrison a personal email praising our work. By month 12, the new inventory management system was fully operational. Excess carrying costs were down 22%. We were exceeding our projected savings. James Hartley, the CEO, started mentioning our engagement in earnings calls as an example of operational excellence improvements. And through it all, Ethan said nothing to me. We existed in the same office like parallel lines, never intersecting, never acknowledging each other beyond the bare minimum professional courtesy. Until the day Harrison had his heart attack. It happened on a Tuesday morning. Harrison was in a board meeting when he collapsed. Paramedics arrived within minutes. He was rushed to the hospital, where doctors performed emergency bypass surgery. He survived, but the prognosis was clear. No more 70-hour weeks. No more high-stress executive decisions. Immediate medical leave, followed by a phased retirement. The board met in emergency session that evening. By Wednesday morning, the announcement went out. Ethan Castellan was named interim CEO, effective immediately. The company-wide email was brief and professional. Harrison was recovering and would transition to chairman emeritus. Ethan would assume all CEO responsibilities. The board expressed full confidence in the leadership transition. I read the email 3 times, each time feeling the ground shift a little more beneath my feet. By that afternoon, Ethan had called an all-hands meeting. He stood at the front of our main conference room, looking every bit the executive he'd always believed himself to be. Tailored suit, confident posture, serious but optimistic expression. I know this transition is unexpected, he began. My father's health scare reminded all of us how quickly circumstances can change. But I want to assure everyone that Castellan Solutions will continue operating with the same commitment to excellence that's defined us for 20 years. He outlined his vision: expanded service offerings, new market segments, strategic growth initiatives, It was a polished speech, probably prepared with help from a consultant. Then he got to organizational changes. As we scale, we need to ensure appropriate oversight and quality control across all client engagements. Effective immediately, I'll be implementing a new review structure. All major client deliverables must be approved through my office before going to clients. All client communications regarding strategic direction or significant decisions must be coordinated through central business development. This ensures consistent messaging and protects our brand integrity. I felt ice forming in my chest. He was creating approval bottlenecks, creating ways to control, delay, or interfere with project execution. Creating ways to control me specifically. After the meeting, I went straight to my office and closed the door, pulled up my current project list. Thornfield was entering year 2, expanding into a second phase of optimization work. I had 3 other mid-sized engagements running. All of them required regular client communication, rapid decision-making, and autonomous execution. All of them would now require Ethan's approval. I pulled out my phone and called Walter. He answered on the second ring. "Hannah, I heard about Harrison. How's he doing?" "Recovering, thankfully, but he's stepping back. Ethan's taking over as CEO." There was a pause. "The son, the one from the pitch." "That's the one." Another pause, longer this time. "Well, that's interesting. Does this affect our engagement?" "Not if I can help it. But Walter, I need you to know that if you start seeing delays in approvals or changes in our communication patterns, it's not coming from me or my team." "Noted." His tone was carefully neutral. "Keep me posted." Over the next month, my fears materialized. Client presentations I'd prepared got held up in Ethan's review queue for days, then returned with requests for strategic reframing that added no value but required extensive revisions. Time-sensitive decisions that I'd normally make autonomously now required formal written justification, submitted through a new approval portal. Client calls that I'd typically handle directly now had to include a business development representative, usually someone from Ethan's team who had no context and contributed nothing except reporting back to him. It was death by 1,000 bureaucratic cuts. My team felt it too. The logistics analyst working on Thornfield's Phase 2 expansion came to my office, frustrated. "Hannah, we're 3 weeks behind schedule because we're still waiting for approval to present the updated warehouse layout options. The client keeps asking when they'll see our recommendations. What do I tell them?" "Tell them we're conducting additional internal quality reviews." That's corporate speak for my boss is blocking me out of spite, and they'll know it. She wasn't wrong. I escalated to Ethan via email, requesting expedited review of time-sensitive Thornfield deliverables. His response came back within an hour. "Quality cannot be rushed. We'll review when schedule permits." I called his office. His assistant said he was unavailable. I walked down to his office, the corner office that used to be his father's, and found him on a call. He saw me through the glass door and deliberately turned his chair away. That evening, I drove to the hospital where Harrison was recovering. Visiting hours were nearly over, but his private nurse recognized me and let me in. Harrison was sitting up in bed, looking diminished in a way that had nothing to do with physical size. The force of personality that had always filled a room seemed dampened, muted. "Hannah," he smiled, but it was tired. "You didn't need to visit. I wanted to see how you're doing." "Alive," which is apparently a good start. Doctors say I need to radically reduce stress, stop working so much, retire like a normal person. He said it like it was a foreign concept. We talked for a few minutes about his recovery, his physical therapy, his wife's insistence that he take up gardening. Then he asked, "How's the Thornfield expansion going?" I hesitated. Harrison was supposed to be reducing stress, not dealing with company politics. "Hannah, I know that look. What's wrong?" So I told him the new approval processes, the delays, the interference, the way Ethan was systematically undermining my ability to deliver for clients. Harrison closed his eyes. "He's punishing you." "Yes." "And using company infrastructure to do it, which means he's putting client relationships at risk to settle a personal score. He sighed heavily. I'd hoped he'd grown past that. I don't want to burden you with this. You need to focus on recovery. What I need is for the company I built not to be destroyed by nepotism and ego. He opened his eyes, and I saw a flash of the old Harrison, sharp, decisive. Unfortunately, what I need and what I can do about it are now two different things. I understand. Do you, Hannah? I'm done. The board made it clear. They'll let me keep a chairman emeritus title to save face, but I have no operational authority. Ethan is running the company. And unless he drives it off a cliff spectacularly enough that the board intervenes, that's not changing. So what do I do? You have 3 options. 1, you endure. Put up with his interference, work around his obstacles, and hope he eventually gets bored or distracted. 2, you escalate to the board directly, risk your career on convincing them that the CEO is sabotaging client work, and pray they take you seriously instead of seeing you as a disgruntled employee. 3. He didn't finish. 3, I prompted. You leave, take your track record and client relationships elsewhere. Start over somewhere that values talent over politics. The thought had crossed my mind, but leaving felt like surrender, like letting Ethan win. I'm not ready to give up yet, I said quietly. Harrison nodded. Then be smart, document everything. Keep clients happy despite the obstacles, build a record that's undeniable. He paused. And Hannah, watch your back. Ethan's not just punishing you, he's building a case to fire you. I left the hospital with Harrison's warning echoing in my head. That night, I started documenting everything. Every delayed approval, every unnecessary revision request, every client communication that got blocked or redirected. I created a detailed timeline with emails, project records, and client feedback. If Ethan wanted to build a case, I'd build a better one. The breaking point came 6 weeks later. Thornfield's Phase 2 expansion was now 8 weeks behind schedule, entirely due to approval delays on our end. Walter had been patient, but even his patience had limits. Monica, the CFO, had started sending pointed emails asking about timeline slippage. I had a presentation ready, warehouse optimization recommendations that Walter's team needed to review to make capital investment decisions. The presentation had been sitting in Ethan's approval queue for 12 days. I sent another escalation email, no response. I called his office. Assistant said he was in meetings all day. I waited outside his office for 40 minutes until he emerged for lunch. Ethan, I need 2 minutes. I'm on my way too. 2 minutes. The Thornfield warehouse presentation has been waiting for approval for almost 2 weeks. They need these recommendations to make investment decisions that affect their next fiscal year budget. If we don't deliver this week, we risk damaging the client relationship and missing our Phase 2 milestones. He looked at me with an expression I'd seen before, calculated, cold. I reviewed the presentation last week. It needs substantial revision. You didn't send any revision notes. Because the issues are fundamental enough that notes wouldn't help. The strategic framing is completely wrong. You're presenting tactical recommendations without connecting them to broader business transformation objectives. Ethan, they don't need transformation objectives. They need to know which warehouse layout will optimize their inventory flow and reduce picking time. And that kind of thinking is exactly why you need oversight. You see tactics, I see strategy. When you can reframe this within an appropriate strategic context, resubmit for review. We don't have time for it. Then you should have submitted stronger work initially. He walked away. I stood in the hallway, shaking with frustration. Then I made a decision. I went back to my office, pulled up the presentation, and sent it directly to Walter with a note. Warehouse optimization recommendations as requested. Let me know when your team is available to review. No approval, no coordination, direct violation of Ethan's new protocols. Walter responded within an hour. Perfect timing. Can you present to our facilities team tomorrow afternoon? I confirmed, then spent the rest of the day preparing and trying not to think about the consequences. The presentation went perfectly. Thornfield's facilities team loved the recommendations. James Hartley dropped in for the last 20 minutes and stayed for an additional 30, asking detailed questions about implementation costs and timelines. As I was packing up, Walter walked me out. "Hannah, I need to say something. This engagement has been phenomenal. You and your team have exceeded every expectation." But he hesitated. "We're hearing things about internal changes at Castellan, about new approval processes slowing things down. Is everything okay?" "We're navigating a leadership transition," I said carefully. "It's creating some process adjustments." "Process adjustments that put our timeline at risk." "Not if I can help it." He stopped walking and turned to face me. "Look, I'm going to be direct. You're the reason this engagement works. Your expertise, your responsiveness, your commitment. If the new leadership structure interferes with that, it becomes a problem for us. Understood?" "Understood." I drove back to the office feeling both vindicated and anxious. The client was happy, the work was strong, but I just openly defied Ethan's authority. I made it to my desk before his assistant called. "Hannah, Ethan needs to see you immediately." His office door was closed. I knocked, no answer. I knocked again. "Come in," his voice was tight. I entered. Ethan sat behind his desk, laptop open, jaw clenched. "Close the door." I did. I just received an interesting email from Thornfield's facilities director, thanking Castellan Solutions for yesterday's excellent presentation on warehouse optimization. The presentation that, according to my records, was still pending revision and approval. The client needed those recommendations to make budget decisions. We were jeopardizing the relationship by delaying. "You went around me." "I did my job." "Your job is following company protocols I established as CEO. My job is delivering results for clients, which I did." His face flushed. "You deliberately violated a direct requirement. You undermined my authority. You put client communication ahead of internal oversight." "Yes, because the alternative was letting bureaucratic point scoring damage an $8 million relationship." "That's not your call to make." "Then whose call is it?" "Yours, the person who's never managed a major client implementation, who showed up unprepared to the pitch and got explicitly excluded by the client's procurement team. You're not blocking my work because it needs improvement, Ethan. You're blocking it because you're still angry that they wanted me instead of you." The words hung in the air like a detonated bomb. Ethan stood slowly. "You're fired." My heart hammered, but I kept my voice steady. "On what grounds?" "Insubordination, violation of company protocols, unauthorized client communication, take your pick. For delivering excellent work that the client explicitly praised. For refusing to follow direct orders from your CEO. Document it then. Put it in writing. Send it to HR with the formal termination paperwork. I'm sure they'll be interested in reviewing the timeline of these new protocols, their impact on client deliverables, and the pattern of approval delays specifically targeting my accounts." "Are you threatening me?" "I'm reminding you that firing your top-performing account executive for successfully serving a major client is going to require justification. Justification that might raise questions you don't want asked." We stared at each other across his desk. "Get out," he said finally. I left, hands shaking. Back at my desk, I immediately pulled up my documentation file and added today's confrontation. Then I sent a carefully worded email to HR, copying myself on my personal email, summarizing the exchange and requesting clarification on the termination discussion. Creating a record, making it official. 2 days passed in tense silence. No termination letter arrived, no follow-up from HR. Ethan avoided me completely. Then on Friday afternoon, my phone rang. Thornfield's main number. "Hannah Westbrook." "Hannah, it's Ashley Brennan from procurement. Do you have a moment?" "Of course, what can I help you with?" "Well, this is slightly unusual, but we've been so impressed with your team's work on our supply chain optimization that we'd like to explore expanding the engagement. We're considering a comprehensive facilities modernization initiative, new warehouse management systems, automated inventory tracking, potentially some robotics integration. Estimated value somewhere between 15 and 20 million over 5 years. My breath caught. That's a significant expansion. It is, and before we start a formal RFP process, James wanted me to reach out directly. If Castellan Solutions is interested in bidding, we'd want the proposal to come from you specifically. Your team, your approach, your leadership. Is that something you'd be positioned to take on? Was it ever? Absolutely, I'd be honored. When would you need a preliminary proposal? Let's set up a scoping call for next week. I'll send some calendar options. And Hannah, this is based entirely on the strength of your work and our team's confidence in you specifically. Just wanted to be clear about that. We finalized details and hung up. I sat at my desk, staring at my phone. $15 to $20 million, the largest deal in Castellan Solutions history, and they wanted me specifically. I needed to tell Ethan. Protocol required it. I also knew exactly what would happen. He'd insert himself into the opportunity, take control of the pitch, and find a way to either claim credit or sabotage my involvement. Unless I changed the equation entirely. I spent the weekend thinking. By Monday morning, I'd made my decision. I requested a meeting with the board's lead independent director, Margaret Chen. No, wait, can't use Chen. Margaret Foster. She'd been on Castellan's board for 8 years, had a background in operations consulting, and was known for asking tough questions. Her assistant scheduled a call for Tuesday afternoon. When Margaret answered, her tone was professionally curious. Hannah, I was surprised to get your meeting request. What can I help you with? I'd prepared carefully for this conversation. Margaret, I need to bring something to the board's attention. It concerns client relationships, operational effectiveness, and risk to company performance under the current leadership structure. A pause, that's quite an opening, go on. I laid it out. The pattern of approval delays, the interference with client deliverables, the documentation of timeline impacts. I framed it carefully, not as personal grievance but as business risk. Clients were noticing. Thornfield had explicitly raised concerns. Project performance was being compromised. Then I shared the new opportunity. 15 to 20 million. Client requesting me specifically, the largest potential deal in company history. And your concern is, Margaret prompted. My concern is that under current processes, this opportunity will be mismanaged. Either through approval delays that frustrate the client, or through leadership insertion that undermines the relationship foundation. I'm bringing this to you because I believe the board should be aware of the business risk before it materializes. Before it materializes, or before you accept an offer elsewhere. She was sharp. I'm committed to Castellan Solutions, I said carefully, but I'm also committed to serving clients effectively. If I can't do that here, I'll need to consider my options. And if you leave, there's a non-compete clause in your contract, which restricts me from soliciting Castellan clients. It doesn't prevent clients from choosing to follow me if they lose confidence in Castellan's ability to serve them effectively under new leadership. Another pause, longer this time. That's a very fine line you're walking, Hannah. I'm aware, which is why I'm having this conversation now, transparently, rather than making decisions unilaterally. Understood. Let me discuss this with the board. We have a meeting scheduled for next week. I'll include your concerns in the executive session agenda. Thank you. Hannah, one more thing. You're betting your career on this. I hope you're prepared for the consequences either way. I am. The following week was excruciating. I continued normal work, had the scoping call with Thornfield, and started preliminary research for the facility's modernization proposal, all while waiting for fallout from the board meeting. It came on Thursday. Margaret's assistant called. The board would like to meet with you tomorrow at 9 a.m. Please keep your calendar clear through noon. I barely slept that night. The next morning, I arrived at our office building's executive conference room at 8:45. Margaret was there, along with 3 other board members. Ethan was not. Hannah, thank you for coming. Margaret gestured to a seat. "We've reviewed your concerns and conducted some additional due diligence. We'd like to hear directly from you about the Thornfield relationship and the new opportunity." For 90 minutes, they questioned me about client feedback, about project timelines, about the approval process impacts, about my communication with Thornfield, about the new facilities modernization deal. I answered everything directly, supported by documentation I'd brought. Finally, Margaret leaned back. "Hannah, the board appreciates you bringing this to our attention. We take client relationships and operational effectiveness very seriously. We're going to discuss next steps internally. You'll hear from us by end of day." I left with no idea whether I'd just saved my career or ended it. At 4:30 that afternoon, Margaret called my cell phone directly. "Hannah, the board has made some decisions. First, we're implementing immediate changes to the approval process structure. Client deliverables for active engagements will be managed through account leads, with executive oversight conducted through quarterly reviews rather than transactional approvals. This restores operational autonomy to senior account executives." Relief flooded through me. Second, given the scope and strategic importance of the Thornfield facilities modernization opportunity, the board is creating a new position, Vice President of Strategic Accounts. This role will have direct authority over our largest client relationships and report directly to the CEO with board oversight. We'd like to offer you that position, effective immediately. I actually gasped. Margaret, that's... It comes with appropriate compensation adjustment, equity stake, and a seat in executive leadership meetings. It also comes with expectations. You'll be responsible for Thornfield and any other accounts over $5 million in value. You'll be building out a team, and you'll be operating at a level where politics and performance intersect constantly. Think carefully before you accept. I don't need to think. Yes, absolutely yes. Good, HR will send formal paperwork Monday. One more thing, Hannah. Ethan is still CEO. This structure creates some healthy tension and board oversight, but you'll be working under his leadership. Can you handle that professionally? Yes. Then welcome to the executive team. The announcement went out company-wide on Monday morning. New organizational structure. New VP of Strategic Accounts position. My name in the executive leadership list. I watched Ethan's office door from my desk. It stayed closed all morning. At 11, his assistant delivered a meeting request. Monday, 2 p.m. When I arrived at his office, he was standing at his window, looking out over the city. "Close the door." I did. He didn't turn around. "The board outmaneuvered me. You outmaneuvered me. Well played." This wasn't about maneuvering. It was about protecting client relationships. Don't insult my intelligence with noble justifications. You went to the board because you saw an opportunity to advance yourself. You leveraged client relationships and timing to force their hand. It was a calculated political move. He finally turned to face me. "I'm actually impressed. I didn't think you had it in you." Had what in me? The willingness to play the game. To use power and leverage instead of just doing good work and hoping someone notices. I met his eyes. "I played the game because you forced me to. I would have been perfectly happy delivering excellent work and building client relationships without any of this. You're the one who made it about power and politics." Maybe, or maybe I just saw the reality you were pretending didn't exist. Companies run on power dynamics, Hannah. Performance matters, but so does positioning, relationships, and knowing when to push. Is there a point to this conversation? The point is that we're now stuck working together at the executive level. You have your victory. You have your title and your client relationships and your board protection. Congratulations. But if you think that means I'm going to make things easy for you, you're mistaken. I never expected easy. I expected professional. Then we're aligned. Professionally, I'll respect your authority over strategic accounts. I'll stay out of your client relationships. I'll support your work in executive meetings. And professionally, I'll be watching for the slightest mistake, the smallest misstep, any crack in your perfect performance that I can leverage. Understood. And professionally, I'll continue doing what I've always done. delivering exceptional results for clients, building strong relationships, and making this company successful despite any obstacles. We stared at each other. "I think we understand each other," Ethan said finally. "I think we do." I left his office feeling something shift. The war wasn't over, but the battlefield had changed. I now had position, protection, and the board's explicit support. Most importantly, I had Thornfield's $15 to $20 million opportunity to prove that none of this had been about ego or politics. It had been about being good enough to make them all realize what I'd known from the start. I belonged in that room. Over the following months, I built out the strategic accounts team, led the proposal for Thornfield's facilities modernization, and systematically proved that the board's decision had been right. The Thornfield expansion contract came through at $17.5 million. We celebrated with the client team at their headquarters, Walter, James, Monica, Ashley, all of them toasting the partnership. James pulled me aside during the celebration. "You know what I remember? That first pitch, when my procurement team asked if we really thought we'd get the strategic partner we needed. I wasn't sure until you started presenting the real substance. Best decision we made." I appreciate that more than you know. And Hannah, whatever political situation you navigated internally to get here, I don't need to know the details, but I can guess you handled it with class. That matters. 6 months later, Harrison returned for a board meeting, his first since the heart attack. He looked healthier, lighter somehow. Retirement suited him. He stopped by my new office, not corner but close, with actual windows. "Vice President Westbrook has a nice ring to it." I smiled. "Thanks to you originally, you gave me the opportunity." "I gave you a job, you created the opportunity yourself." He sat down, looking around the space. "Ethan's still CEO." "He is." "How's that working?" "Professionally, we're not friends. We're probably never going to be, but we've found an equilibrium." "Good, that's mature." He paused. "For what it's worth, I'm sorry I didn't handle the succession better. I let family cloud my judgment about readiness. Ethan's learning, but I should have built a real leadership team instead of trying to hand him the company outright. The board structure now creates that balance. Because you forced the issue, you took a huge risk going to them directly. I took a calculated risk based on documented business impact, and I was ready to accept the consequences either way." Harrison smiled. "That's exactly why you're sitting in this office. You know what I've learned in retirement, Hannah? The people who succeed long-term aren't necessarily the most talented or the most connected. They're the ones who understand when to be patient and when to push. You've figured that out." After he left, I sat at my desk thinking about the journey. From that conference room where Ethan had dismissed me, to this office, this title, this portfolio of major client relationships. It hadn't been about revenge, despite how it might have looked from outside. It had been about something simpler and more essential. Being good enough that they couldn't ignore it. Being clear enough about my value that when forced to choose, clients chose substance over status. And having the courage to risk everything when the alternative was being slowly diminished into irrelevance. That evening, I pulled up my calendar. Tomorrow morning, executive leadership meeting. Tomorrow afternoon, Thornfield quarterly review. Next week, proposal presentation for a potential new strategic account worth $12 million. The work continued. The challenges continued. Ethan's watchful antagonism continued. But so did I, stronger, clearer, and finally positioned exactly where I'd earned the right to be. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's simply being undeniably excellent at what you do, and having the courage to make sure that excellence can't be buried under someone else's insecurity. Ethan taught me that workplace politics are real, whether we want to acknowledge them or not. But he also taught me, unintentionally, that the best way to navigate those politics isn't to play small and hope to avoid conflict. It's to build such a strong foundation of real value that when you're finally forced to stand up for yourself, you're standing on solid ground. The director's son said dismissively, "This isn't really your area, is it?" He meant it as a dismissal, a way to put me in what he thought was my place. He was right, in a way. My area wasn't delivering empty frameworks and leveraging family connections. My area was understanding clients, solving complex problems, and building relationships based on trust and results. Turns out that area was exactly what the client, and eventually the board, was looking for. If you've stayed with me through this story, thank you. These workplace experiences can be isolating when you're living through them. Sharing them here, knowing others might recognize similar challenges, makes them feel less lonely. If this resonated with you, I'd be grateful if you'd subscribe to continue this journey with us toward 8,000 subscribers. Your support means more than you might realize. Until the next story, stay strong, know your worth, and never let anyone convince you that doing excellent work is somehow inappropriate.